The story of the Vikings takes us to Saaremaa Island in Estonia. Here, a team of archaeologists from Tallinn excavated an amazing cache of Viking artifacts that turned the history of these Scandinavian pirates on its head. Picts excavated one of the most impressive Viking burial sites known to experts today. The remains of more than 40 human skeletons in 2 boat graves were unearthed in 2011 during road construction.
We can say for sure that it was a battle grave and that there was a sort of big battle. 40 bodies in 2 ships. That says it all. The battle had to be hard. We can see vicious wounds on the skeletons. Some, for example, have hacked hands and broken skulls. So it was hard, and they had to bury those victims fast.
Tallinn researcher Riley Salme is studying bones of the Saaremaa warriors and how they died. The skeletons all showed signs of violent deaths and multiple battle wounds.
The upper arm is cut into 4 pieces. There are more than 4 cuts into the bone. The hand position or upper arm position could have been some like that, because some of the strokes are in the same direction, in the same angle, and then the position has changed.
When the team from Tallinn applied modern dating techniques to the skeletons, they were shocked by what they found.
Analysis of the items we found, including the skeletons and the organic material, shows they go back to pre-Viking times.
Incredibly, the ships and the bodies date back to at least 100 years before the first recorded Viking raid. Yet the weapons, the shape of the ship, and artifacts buried with them prove that the men found in the 2 boat graves came from Scandinavia. These 40 bodies show that Vikings were raiding at least a century earlier than scholars previously believed.
We can be sure that these men were Scandinavian sailors who somehow met their death at Salme.
As we shall see, the Viking Age was one of incredible brutality, and the ferocious battle that raged on the beach of Saaremaa must have been major if 40 warriors were hacked to pieces and then respectfully buried by their comrades.
I think that during battle he fell down. He was attacked from behind, and maybe he fall down. He was fighting probably because the cuts are in his right upper arm. But in my opinion, this upper arm or the hand was somehow fixed, because you cannot make the strokes like this, that they are in the same angle, more or less. And finally I found this calcaneus, one of the bones in the foot. I show you, which also means that he should have been lying or something, because the hit is somewhere here. And of course the final has been this decapitation, in my opinion.
Archaeological evidence in Russia confirms that Vikings raided, but also traded, along the great rivers of Eastern Europe at least as early as the mid-8th century. Adrian Salin is a researcher in early Russian history at St. Petersburg University, Russia.
No one knew what was in ancient Russia. Everyone knew that somewhere around the Caspian Sea they were minting silver coins, and that they could be exported to the rest of Europe in unimaginable quantities. And it was this area, between the Baltic and the Caspian Seas, along the Volga River, that was the first to be colonized by Scandinavians.
Here at Staria Ladoga, on the shores of the Volkhov River, tree ring dating of wooden objects such as this stick carved with letters of the Viking alphabet called runes shows that Scandinavian traders and warriors appeared here long before any mention of Vikings in the written chronicles.
With regards to Staria Ladoga, we can see that Scandinavian artifacts dating back to before the Viking Age have been found in the oldest of all the sites in the area of Staria Ladoga.
The ancient chronicles known as sagas and runic inscriptions in Scandinavia have given a name to these men whose exploits went unrecorded for centuries before they slashed their way into the history books. They were the Vikings. They were men and women who left the safety of their homes to explore and plunder distant lands, from modern-day Poland, Ukraine and Russia to the islands of the North Atlantic and as far as America. The Vikings spread not only terror, but also a web of trade. The mystery of where the Vikings came from and why they attacked has now been revealed. Scandinavian warriors had begun plundering coastlines of the Baltic Sea and Atlantic Ocean early in the 7th century. By the end of the 8th century, they had occupied the northernmost of the British Isles, plundered Scotland, and dispossessed the indigenous population, the Picts, whose monuments still stand on Orkney today.
Well, I'm sure initially people came here trading, and that would have been the first contact, and the first contact would certainly have been on that level, and they would have been finding out what it was like in Shetland as a result of that. However, and you get objects appearing in the Pictish context showing that kind of link. The degree to which it did or didn't become aggressive, we don't really know.
Here at Jarlshof on Shetland, the way the Vikings reused Pictish dwellings is clearly visible. What happened to the locals remains a mystery. Sometime in the 8th century, warriors from Norway came here and the Pictish culture disappeared.
The term Viking really only applies to the very first settlers who were in that initial exploratory, possibly raiding phase, which maybe in Shetland perhaps only lasted as much as a generation. I don't think it's as black and white as either you were a raider and a pirate or you were a farmer and had your own industry or soapstone industry or whatever it was that you did. I'm sure that all these roles were mixed up together and it's not clear-cut.
The Vikings probably used hit-and-run tactics to raid coastal and riverside communities in Scotland and Ireland for decades before they attacked a monastery in northern England where they found more gold than they could imagine. But they did not come for plunder alone. A titanic struggle was underway, pitting the Christian empire of Charlemagne against the last pagans of Europe. The holy island of Lindisfarne is cut off from land during high tides. Today, tourists flock here for the seabirds. Monks first came here because it was isolated. In the distance, the Northumbrian castle of Bamborough was close enough for the holy men to exert religious influence and receive protection. No one expected the vicious attack of the 8th of June 793. Chronicler Alcuin of York commented, "Behold, the church of St. Cuthbert, spattered with the blood of the priests of God, despoiled of all its ornaments. A place more venerable than all in Britain is given as a prey to pagan peoples." Alcuin of York, however, was far away in Aachen, the capital city of the greatest empire of Europe, ruled by Charlemagne, champion of the Christians. Charlemagne's drive northwards and the 30-year-long forcible conversion of the Saxons to Christianity brought his empire to the very edges of pagan Denmark. Inevitably, Christian chroniclers were the sworn enemies of the pagan Vikings. But, according to Marit Vea, the lead archaeologist at the royal palace at Aavadsnes, Norway, the pagans may have been reacting to Christian atrocities.
At that time, Charlemagne was conquering territory after territory in Europe. And Charlemagne's war, well, his culture minister was Alcuin. He had been to Lindisfarne Monastery, for instance. The first attack known to us was at Lindisfarne Monastery. So one theory is that the raid was a response to Charlemagne's aggression.
We shall see that Viking raids became invasions when politics in Scandinavia and in the great kingdoms of Europe created opportunities for attack. The raids were planned to strike when the enemy was weakest and the potential for plunder the greatest. Charlemagne died in 815 AD, and 30 years later his grandsons began a civil war that set 3 Frankish armies against each other. The opportunity to attack and pillage into the heart of the empire was too great to be missed. The great river Seine flows into the English Channel and leads all the way to Paris. In 841, Danish Viking Asgeir sailed up it with 13 ships, less than 1,000 men, and burned down the city of Rouen. He went on up the river to the magnificent monastery of Jumièges, where he ransomed the monks. The Vikings stayed for the winter and ravaged the countryside the next year too. In 845, the city of Paris itself was looted by a certain Ragnar. The Viking raids continued for the next 30 years. The Vikings avoided facing the Franks in battle, but more often they were paid either to leave or to fight each other, or serve as mercenaries. They were also given land in the northern Netherlands and in the Rhine estuary in exchange for their military services.
Il ne faut pas négliger les violences.
We can't ignore the shock and the violence, but nor can we see the relations between the Scandinavians and the Franks and other peoples as only this. There were also other types of relationship, including trade relations, as well as other relations such as discussions, negotiations, exchanges.
Des discussions, des négociations, des palabres.
When they found resistance in France, the Vikings turned to England, which was little more than a patchwork of weak kingdoms. Bamborough was the seat of one of the Northumbrian kings, and Northumbria was just one of 4 kingdoms in England at the time. Northumbria stretched from the Scottish border to the Humber River, just south of York. It was divided into 2 sub-kingdoms, constantly at war with each other, while the middle of England was occupied by Mercia. The kingdoms of East Anglia and Wessex occupied the east and west of the country. Divided and mutually hostile, they were unable to put up resistance to what initially was little more than a Viking nuisance. The part-time warriors of the English kingdoms were no match for the determined Viking predators.